Hello, my name is Amy Brown Curtis, and I'm here to talk to you about the support of stronger laws against convicted sex offenders. I've invited my friend, Cherise Sewell, to participate in this exercise. Cherise, say hello.
Hello.
First, I'd like to tell you a story. It's a story about a little girl. Her name is Polly Klaas. On the night of October 1st, 1993, 12-year-old Polly Klaas was hosting a slumber party for two of her friends. It was her first sleepover party ever, and the girls were having a fun time, laughing and hiding under the covers and acting silly. When Polly went to retrieve pillows from another room, she was confronted by a stranger. This stranger had a large knife. The man was high on booze and drugs, and he kidnapped Polly from her home. The kidnapper's name was Richard Allen Davis. Richard Allen Davis was arrested on November 30th, and when he was arrested, he confessed to the kidnapping, rape, and murder of Polly Klaas. Davis was a career criminal who had convictions for robbery, burglary, assault, kidnapping, and he also had a long history of sexual assaults against women and children. At the time of Polly Klaas's kidnapping and murder, Davis was on parole. Now you have to ask yourself the question, why was Davis out and why was he allowed to once again commit a crime of this magnitude? Unfortunately, Polly Klaas is not the only victim of the judicial system's neglect to implement laws allowing the indefinite confinement of repeat sexual offenders. Often, these crimes are committed by violent sex offenders who serve minimum prison sentence, who are released and allowed to re-offend. You have to ask yourself once again, how would you feel if Polly was your child? How would it feel to realize that Polly is one of many who fall victim to convicted sex offenders who continue to victimize men, women, and children after they've been released from prison or jail? Should sex offenders who are determined to be sexually dangerous be civilly confined indefinitely? And also ask yourself, should the federal government be allowed to confine violent sexual offenders indefinitely after they have completed their sentences? Today, these are some of the questions that I'd like to discuss with you all. I will talk about the laws that have been implemented to protect society against sexual offenders. Also, we'll talk about the states where these laws are designed to protect society and have been challenged. And lastly, we'll talk about the need for each and every one of you to support stronger laws against sex offenders. There are several laws that have been implemented or designed to protect society against sexual predators, such as Megan's Law. This law was passed in 1994. Megan Law provides two major information services to the public: sex offender registry and community notification. The second law is the Jessica Lunsford Act. This was implemented in 2005. Jessica's law implemented a mandatory minimum sentence of 25 years in prison and lifetime electronic monitoring of adults convicted of lewd and violent acts against a victim less than 12 years old. And thirdly, the Adam Walsh Act, which a lot of us have heard of. And this was implemented and made into a law in 2006. The Adam Walsh Child Protection and Safety Act was a law that expanded the National Sex Offender Registry and instructs each state how it instructs states how to apply and post offender information onto the internet. In addition, it also provided a federal law for the government to be able to, once a sex offender has finished its jail sentence, it allows the federal government to go in and say, oh, this sexual offender is violent, so we need to keep them indefinitely, which means that they may never get out of jail. These laws and others like them were born out of kidnapping, rape, and murder of children. It has been found that a majority of the crimes that these laws were born of were perpetrated by repeat sex offenders. Although the laws are designed to protect society, stronger provisions are necessary, and many states have implemented laws to confine and treat highly dangerous sex offenders following the completion of their jail sentences. According to the Washington State Institute for Public Policy, there are 12 states that authorize the confinement and treatment of highly violent sex offenders. And those states that have these laws are Arizona, California, Florida, Illinois, Iowa, Kansas, Minnesota, New Jersey, North Carolina and South Carolina, Washington, and Wisconsin. These laws are commonly referred to as sexual predatory laws. As of the summer of 1998, more than 520 sexual predators have been committed in these 12 states. The U.S. Supreme Court has agreed to decide the constitutionality of the federal law. The Adam Walsh Child Protection and Safety Act, allowing the indefinite confinement of convicted sex offenders deemed sexually dangerous by the government after they have completed their sentences. While the court will hear these arguments this fall, a decision will not be issued until sometime in the spring of 2010. Inmates that are indefinitely confined in New Orleans, Kansas City, and North Carolina have challenged the laws mandating the civil confinement of dangerous sex offenders. The most recent, in April of 2009 in North Carolina, won the ruling that the government had exceeded its authority and the ruling was unconstitutional. The government appealed the court's ruling, and the Fourth Circuit of Appeals also found that the provision of the Adam Walsh Act to be unconstitutional. This ruling instructed North Carolina to release all sex offenders held under the Adam Walsh Act. There are currently 77 inmates being held in North Carolina. The government successfully blocked the release of those sex offenders and requested an emergency hearing before the U.S. Supreme Court. Many organizations, such as the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, the Clost Kids organization, and victims of sexual violence are lobbying for stronger laws against convicted sex offenders. Mark Lunsford, whose daughter Jessica Lunsford was raped and killed in 2005 by a convicted sex offender, told CBS News, "It makes me angry because we already know that these problems exist. We created the laws, but we don't enforce them." According to the Department of Justice, the average child molester will victimize 50 girls before being caught and convicted. A child molester that seeks out boys will molest 150 boys before being caught and convicted, and he will commit at least 280 sexual crimes in his lifetime. The standard pedophile will commit 117 sexual crimes in his lifetime. So what does that tell you? Consequently, as a result of these statistics, sex offenders constitute 4.7% of almost 5 million offenders in federal or state prisons. In jails, they're either on probation or on parole. Sex offenders comprise approximately 1% of the federal prison population, 9.7% of the state prison population, and 3.4% of all jail inmates, 3.6% of offenders on probation, and 4% of offenders on parole. Now, of these 5 million sex offenders,